The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country tonight, again at your best little rural show that you've got in your newsfeed every night from 7 o'clock, of course, Monday through Thursday. Or, of course, binge listening on that long trip up the back blocks into the Wop-Wops on your trip to check on Mavis after lockdown. You know, she must need some much-needed flour, of course. I was listening to Marcus, my old mate Marcus Lush. You'd think that I would have learned to turn on the rock or ZM or set the sound when I drive home after this show. Note the squeaky tones of Bluff's most iconic talkback host, and Sheila came on. Well, I didn't actually catch her name, but Sheila will do. She could not get over the madness of these people lining up at 4:30 a.m. to get McDonald's, and why can't people make coffee at home or buy food at the supermarket and make it at home? Of course, rural New Zealand, we get this, right? This is what we used to. I was actually reflecting. We used to have a rat tray account. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It was the old foodstuffs wholesale store in Andy Bay in Dunedin when I was a kid. I remember going there with Mum, supermarket shopping on steroids. It was like we were catering for a week at an old folks' home, but it was just Mum hated town, so we didn't have to go in for at least a couple of months. So on that note, have we got disconnected from our food systems? Yes, in urban New Zealand, of course, but how food is produced. And I'm also very excited about how the swing back is in full motion as we have been able to use this lockdown to experiment and, of course, grow our own food. Of course, not in the last month, but over the last season, it's been one of my first times to get a real proper go at a veggie garden and have, lessons. Let's just call them lessons. Not the word that starts with F. It's not a vegetable. And I'm excited to keep learning every season because we've got every season for the rest of our lives to perfect the art of vegetable growing. So tonight I want to hear in the comments below, everywhere, 10 plus platforms that we're broadcasting Sarah's Country. What were some of those failings? Be honest in your veggie garden this season. Or I think it's an opportunity for us to share tips maybe. Mine was broccoli. I don't know whether it was the season or what I was doing. But someone said to me the other day, if you grow one lettuce, you're a farmer. You experience the same conditions as a farmer who grows 1,000 lettuces, water availability, soil nutrients, pests, etc. So let's be all in this together in regards to being able to learn how we can and why I'm talking about this. So I'm excited to have on Sarah's Country tonight a very entrepreneurial and enthusiastic young woman, Flora Brons, and her mission to connect us more with vegetable growing with her grow kits that she sells at markets and educating children. That's after 7:30. There's always, of course, lots to talk about with Minister Shane Jones, and we have a lineup of topics and questions here on everything from localising our wood processing to improving our rural broadband to, of course, speeding up the PGP funding into the regions maybe. Add your questions. I want them in the live stream below on Facebook so I can put them, of course, to Minister Jones after 7:40. And towards the end of the show, I thought I'd ring up an old mate of mine, Cam Higgy. As I'm starting to turn my thinking, as it's autumn, it's always about, the bull selling season. And of all my bull breeding clients wondering how amidst COVID-19 they're planning on operating these bull sales. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be through private treaty? And how are the buyers going to react and absorb this new normal, maybe for this year or maybe continuing? That's all at the end of the show. It's 7:50. But soon on Sarah's Country, we're going to head to Southland and turn our attention to the feed shortage situation there, as winter crops are in dire situation after the February flooding. How are Southland dairy farmers getting on, finding grazing elsewhere, and of course advice on feed budgeting. That's from Agribusiness Limited's Deane Carson after his webinar he gave today to the NZIPIM members. But first, my thoughts of the day as we nudge nearer to May Day. 1st of May Day, a celebration with a long and varied history dating back a millennia, with parts of its origins to workers' rights and the conditions they were, of course, having to work in. So 2020, Gets me thinking. We have come so far, right, to be able to protect human rights and provide safe working environments. Yet, after Mel Poulton's interview last night, I've been really starting to follow and concerned about the situation in the US meat plants. Overnight, of course, out comes Trump. We've got upwards of 90 beef, chicken and pork processing plants in the States have shut due to staff infected by the coronavirus. And with over 5,000 workers per meat plant, they are today forced by Trump to process amidst this global pandemic. Shoulder to shoulder, boots and all, on with it. And this is under government order to shield companies from their legal liability to keep people safe. Meat, in Trump's eyes, is critical infrastructure, and he's acting like a wartime president. But he's already lost more people to COVID than the Vietnam War. And they're still allowed to go to the beach. So in the words of Fred Dagg tonight, I want to play you this before our first guest, just in case you forgot how lucky we are.
This is Sarah's Country.
And now the delegate from New Zealand, Mr. Fred Dagg.
At the dawn of the day in the great Southern Ocean, when the world's greatest fish was being landed and the boat they were pulling it into was sinking, the sea was quite lumpy and the weather was foul and the bloke with the map was as pissed as an owl and the boys called out, "Maui, you clown, let it go." In the noise, he reached down for his grandmother's jawbone and he winked at his mates and said, "Boys, we don't know how lucky we are. I've a feeling I have stumbled on something substantial. We don't know how lucky we are. We don't know how lucky we are." I was speaking to a mate of mine just the other day, a guy called Bruce Bayliss actually, who lives up our way. He's been away on a round-the-world 8th Army do for a year, more or less. I said, "Describe the global position, Bruce." He said, "Fred, it's a mess. We don't know how lucky we are in this country. We don't know how lucky we are. We don't know how lucky we are. We don't know how lucky we are." There's a guy I know who lives in town. I see him about once a year, I suppose. He's had a coronary since Easter. He's got a hemorrhage in his ear. He went bankrupt a couple of weeks back, and now his wife's left him too. I said, "You're looking odd, mate. You're looking queer. What are you going to do?" He said, "We don't know how lucky we are to live in this joint, Fred. We don't know how lucky we are," he repeated. We don't know how lucky we are. We don't know how lucky we are. So when things are looking really bad and you're thinking of giving it away, remember New Zealand's a cracker. And I reckon come what may, if things get appallingly bad and we're all under constant attack, remember we want to see good clean ball and for God's sake, feed your bats. We don't know how fortunate we are to have that place. We don't know how propitious are the circumstances, Frederick. We don't know how lucky we are, mate. We don't know how lucky we are. We don't know how lucky we are. Get it right. We just don't realise how fortunate we are. We have no idea of the luck we possess. Collectively, we just don't know how lucky we all are. Full stop.
Very baby-faced Zinzan Brooke there, if you'd noticed in that video, if you're watching along. Now, of course, I want you to give a thumbs up if you loved Fred Dagg, you miss Fred Dagg, and you wish that we had another rural character like Fred Dagg. But if anything, that song can submit to you that we don't know how lucky we are. And I really, really hope that that message gets through. I'm taking your comments on, of course, we were talking about our veggie gardens, our successes and our failures. Jock Innes has said white butterfly is a real pain. My mum suggested, is it dairy dust? That got rid of white butterflies, I think, moths, especially in your brassicas. But of course, talking about veggie gardens. We've, of course, we've got Flora on the show coming up, as well as Deane Carson, Shane Jones, and Cam Higgy. So if you've got any comments or questions for our guests tonight, please put them down. I can see all of your questions. Southland farmers whose winter feed plans have involved stock being grazed off farm are being urged by Beef and Lamb New Zealand and Dairy NZ to make sure their winter feed is still available to fulfil the grazing agreement, and then update their feed budget, of course, through to spring. But with many sheep and beef farmers, going into the winter is actually proving very hard, as they're carrying far more stock than they budgeted for due to these COVID-19 restrictions in our meat processing plants. And then a feed pinch, of course, on top of that from this year's flooding. It's all really one out of the box. And Southland's Agribusiness Limited's consultant, Deane Carson, is, I'll tell you what, frontline staff. Deane joins us now on Serious Country. Deane, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course, they're saying frontline staff. I mean that genuinely. Could you just give us a bit of a lay of the land and what a day-to-day world is like for you at the moment?
Well, in lockdown, I've been doing a lot of Zoom conference meetings. I can have anywhere between 4 and 5 Zooms a day, and sometimes 2. So it's somewhere in between. Majority of that is actually focusing on feed budgets and making sure we can get the supply and the demand meeting up. Some of the cases are a bit tougher than others, but we are finding solutions, and we are getting there. It's just about formulating a plan and making sure we put some good thought into it.
So we actually have quite an international audience here on Sarah's Country, Deane, just for your knowledge, but also for the knowledge that if we just back the track up to February and why that flooding happened at such a crucial time in terms of winter crops getting established.
The issue probably started even before that in planting. We planted quite late because the weather was quite wet. So planting actually sort of created the issue. And then we had a flood event, particularly in the Matara and the Lower Areti catchment. And it was sort of a record flood that we really hadn't seen those conditions in most people's lifetime. And those low-lying areas close to the Matara and the Areti rivers, a lot of the crops got really well decimated, and the chances of them recovering were quite low. So some of the farmers actually had to replant their crops really late in the season, and that's caused a real challenge for some of those farmers to find extra feed when our crops have been behind across the region.
Well, it's pretty balmy here in Canterbury. Are you experiencing similar temperatures and ground conditions to get those late sowing crops up and running?
It's warm at the moment. We've had some pretty good weather over the last 2 or 3 days, but I think probably for the last month it hasn't been that great for growing crops. We've had lots of rain, which in some ways we'd love to be able to export some of it up north. But
Central Otago.
And Northland. We'd love to be able to pump it away, but lower Southland has had sort of 40% more than our normal April rainfall, so it's been pretty wet, and that comes on the back of a pretty wet March as well. So it hasn't been easy sort of leading up to winter, and certainly our crops haven't really recovered. We live in hope, but most of the budgets we're doing now are based on sort of the crop yields that we'd expect. We're not being overly hopeful for crop yields to recover.
So in dealing with, we're going into, winter grazing situations, that there's contractually a lot of arrangements that you must be dealing with, which could be sort of a very interesting situation, can I say, where the feed's just simply not there yet, very hard to find an alternative.
Yeah, most of the farmers are having good conversations. The graziers that have a dairy farmer associated with them are having good conversations and setting expectations of lower crop yields. And typically that's sort of, 10 to 20% behind where they'd normally be. There is quite an unknown for a lot of people as to what their crop yields are going to be. And, I do expect as the winter kicks in and we get through the winter, there will be a few challenges, because I think some farmers will just try and make the crop last, and that's going to create a few issues. So we are sort of preparing ourselves for a few of those tougher conversations during the winter. But a key message we're having right now is actually get your crop measured as soon as you can, recognising there's some limitations, and get your feed budget done. There's nothing like an early plan to actually ensure that we overcome the issues before we don't have any more solutions.
Deane, Agribusiness Limited has been in the game for quite some time now. In terms of things like feed budgeting and even body condition scoring, how far have we come, and what sort of time period of this type of farm management?
Yeah, certainly body condition scoring has really improved probably in the last 4 or 5 years. The number of people that are certified to do body condition scoring has really increased. Within our company, we've got, I think, 3 or 4 staff who are certified to do body condition scoring, where 10 years ago we didn't have any. So yeah, things have really changed. And we certainly, I think, quite a bit better at feed budgeting with some of the digital technology than we used to be. Some of the video conferencing actually gives us an opportunity. It's quite cool. The farmer can see my screen as I'm doing the feed budget, and it does support a bit better accuracy, where a farmer will sort of be able to check my figures as I'm putting them in. So yeah, some of the video conferencing has actually helped with the feed budgeting. That said, there is a level of uncertainty around some of the feed budgets because we're doing them remotely. We don't actually know what the crop covers are. We're sort of relying on farmer assessments, and same with pasture covers as well. We just don't have that ability to sort of have that second check. So a lot of the feed budgets have a level of uncertainty. And I think we'll sort some of those uncertainties out in the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks, once we sort of get away from lockdown as soon as that happens.
Not trying to talk about negatives, but what are some of the extreme situations that you are seeing about placing of stock?
I guess some of the grazing contracts are being cancelled, and it's just trying to find new homes for those grazing contracts. I did have one email sent to me the other day that was a number of thousands of animals that were looking for grazing. My eyebrows really raised when I saw that. We think quite a few dairy farmers are going to have 50 odd cows that they're going to have to find some wintering capacity for, and that's going to be quite difficult when crops are down 10 to 20%. So, I think the average farmer is going to have some challenges, and there will be a few extreme cases where they really struggle to meet the needs.
Okay, Deane, to finish, we've got some lovely comments coming in, actually. Bruce has said that Dino is right. The south has been tough, just the opposite tough to the North Island. And Andy Muir said that, good work, Mr. Carson. Haven't had a frost and gore this season yet. I'm sure it will happen, though. So, Deane, can you please just wrap us up around, we're going to swing back to how we started. We're talking about vegetable gardening, completely different to the topic, but not at this, not too far away. It's the same sort of thing. You need all the stars to align to make sure you got a good crop. I really struggle with my broccoli this year. Have you got any advice for me? How's your veggie garden been?
Very embarrassing this year. I'm normally quite proud of my spuds. I normally like to grow a really good spud crop, but this year the planting, just like a farmer, the planting conditions were not great. So I basically relied on weed potatoes to grow, and my glasshouse has just been an absolute embarrassment. If veggie garden is a measure of farm consultancy skills, then I'm a bit nervous about my future career. I don't know. I think in terms of broccoli, just make sure it's got plenty of water and plenty of phosphate, and a little bit of nitrogen now and again, and The rest is pretty easy with broccoli.
Okay. All right. I will do some reading on that. Thank you so much for taking the time. There's some insightful words there from Deane Carson from Agribusiness in Southland. Now, if you've just joined Serious Country for the first time, Serious Country is on demand automatically first thing in the morning on podcast. A lot of people, I'm getting told, enjoying listening to us on podcast. So check us out and give us a subscribe. Now, of course, we are talking vegetable growing. I'd like to know what your failings have been this year and any tips. Dearest Dust, that's the word, Paul. Thank you very much for that. And any tips on growing broccoli? I've been told it wasn't cold enough this season and it was just a wee bit too extreme. We're talking about that because, of course, after the break, we are talking to Flora Brons and what work she's doing with her new business, Flora Grow Kits, and connecting New Zealanders with the benefit of growing their own food.
This is Sarah's Country.
To New Zealand.
We know things are really tough out there right now.
People are concerned about their health and the health of their loved ones.
People are worried about the economy and when will things get back to normal.
Believe me when I say, us farmers are feeling it too. But now's no time to panic.
Our country can get through this together.
We just need to follow instructions and stay home.
Inside our bubble.
Let's flatten this curve and stop this disease spreading.
Together!
You don't need to worry about supermarkets getting low on food. There's plenty to go around for
everyone!
All the countries that could run out of food, New Zealand is not one of them.
Our farmers are world leading.
And we're damn good at what we do, producing high quality food.
We have strong supply lines.
And we're all working hard to keep food on the table. For your family and for ours. New Zealand dairy farmers produce enough for 100 million people.
You're in good hands, New Zealand.
You can count on us to keep calm and carry on farming.
We're trusting you to stay at home to keep our country safe.
We are following the rules too.
We can do this!
We're all in this together.
Cheers, New Zealand.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits.
children, chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
grow, milk, dredge,
rear, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Now, if you've just joined us, welcome to Sarah's Country tonight. If you've just joined us for the first time, we're live 7 o'clock Monday through Thursday, and of course on demand first thing in the morning on podcasts. Tonight, what we're doing is gathering some comments around your vegetable garden, failures and tips. First real season for me, and had a boomer cherry tomato crop. Maybe that's just an easy thing to grow, I don't know. And quite a boomer across a lot of things, but a lot of little failures as well. Like the carrots were little nuggies, you know, they didn't really fully grow, and there's so many things going on. And why we're talking about that is really connecting people with the fact that if you grow one lettuce, you're the situation as someone growing 1,000 lettuces. Same situation around water and soil quality and climatic changes and all sorts of things. So it's a great way to be able to connect us to the reality that we're all farmers. And Joel's mother, Joanne Rock, Joel, she's going
to love that show,
Oh, she will. She drops into my DMs on Instagram most nights and shares me photos from what's it? Belfast.
Yeah, Belfast. We're Belfast.
Beautiful spot there in Northern Ireland. And she's very proud of her, because they're going into spring,
Yep.
her vegetable garden.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's basically, I think that's been her big thing in lockdown, is just the wee vegetable garden she's got in the back now. Yeah.
Has she always been a good gardener, your mother? Good cook?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're just checking out.
Best cook. Yes, Mum. How's it going?
Oh, there we go. Whoop, whoop. She's excited. She's got to throw out a shout out. Now, I met our next guest as we were both meant to be sharing the stage together at an event I was so looking forward to in May in Christchurch. It was titled Entrepreneurial Woman with Purpose. I like to say me to a T a little bit. The founder, Catherine van der Meulen, pivoted from a live event into creating a new online business community around raw, long, honest business advice into a podcast format. And that's where Flora, she discovered my business journey and I discovered hers, because she was, of course, meant to be on that stage. And I was absolutely blown away about when I had to catch up with Flora, how much she's achieved from her Lincoln days, which wasn't actually that long ago, following her mother's passion for gardening and her passion for teaching, establishing Flora in Amberley in North Canterbury. And Flora joins us now for some key messaging on storytelling and bringing rural and urban communities together. Flora, thank you so much for coming on to Sarah's Country tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I just wanted to start. I just mentioned there about your journey from Lincoln to Flora. Am I right in picking you're at the ripe age of 24, 23?
23, yeah, just turned 23. I had my birthday in lockdown, which was a bit sad.
Oh, well, happy birthday from everyone watching, Flora. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your business journey. So I just want to, your motivation. You went to Lincoln, but you're not from a farming background. And tell us that journey from there through to, of course, launching Flora Grow Kits.
Yeah, so there was the change in, government was happening, and there was a bit of heat being thrown at the agricultural industry, as you know very well, Sarah. And in that time, I was sort of thinking, what is the future of farming, and especially for a female, coming into the industry just fresh out of uni. So I decided to do a diploma in teaching. And I did my diploma in teaching, which was a year. And then, and I've been teaching since then, which has been the last year and a bit now. So, and the whole education thing is a big part of my purpose and what sort of drives me with my wee business. And then I'm teaching agribusiness and agri-science in Christchurch. So that enabled me to sort of have that education channel. And then I thought, I want to do this in my own time sort of thing. So I started my wee business with my wee grow kits to get people growing their own plants. Yeah.
It's fantastic. And how have you, just going back to your agri education path that you're on, taking your learnings from Lincoln and bringing it to high school students, how hard is that to get them at that age, that niggly age, and then teenagers, and they sort of think they already know everything as opposed to our younger kids?
Yeah, I don't think it's that they sort of think they know everything. They think they know everything, but that's cool. It's tough, but I think they appreciate that I've had real world experience and that it wasn't that long ago. Some of them, like I remember at school and having some ancient teachers, and it was quite hard to connect with them because their industry experience or whatever was some time ago. So it's really cool that I can give them those examples and that networking for them, especially my senior students. I don't know if they appreciate it that much yet. It's hard to tell because, they're teenagers. But I think in a couple of years they might look back and go, oh, that was really, Miss Brons was really handy for that. She gave me that connection or whatever. So, it's a bit of a mission, but I think when you start teaching, you're like, I'm going to change the world. Like, this is me. And then you realize when you get there, like,
I think everybody in their early 20s thinks we're going to change the world for it, to be honest. Hey, now talking about that, though, your entrepreneurial spirit, I went home and after our chat and I said, Ellie, do you know a girl called Flora? And she said, oh, yeah, Flora's a legend. She was into everything at Lincoln. She was such a go-getter. How much of that was just your hunger to work out your place in the ag industry industry and that challenge probably as a woman to work out how we can be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I tried to keep a really open mind when I was at uni, and it was hard. I have a semi-rural background, being raised out this way, but it was hard not coming straight off a farm and then coming to this Lincoln farming dominated place. But keeping an open mind was sort of the key thing for me, and just trying a little bit of everything. And I loved that about my degree. I was able to do marketing and management and plant science, animal science, forestry, all sorts of different things. And I think especially for young people going into the industry or going to uni, they sort of think, oh, this is what I'm going to do and that's it, and I think that mindset can be a bit crippling for people, because then they sort of like get to a point where they think, oh, this isn't for me, and then they feel bad about it. So yeah, just a bit of trialing everything I thought was my best way to learn.
Good on you.
Yeah.
So we talked about in the intro your mother's passion for gardening, and we share that absolutely. Our mother is extremely passionate about gardening. Did a horticulture degree in Cromwell as well, and knows every Latin name of everything. So I'm sure we're probably on the same page. But you've taken your mum's passion and turned it into a very flourishing business called Flora.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I have my mum and supporting me and giving me advice, because the thing is, although I'm, getting people on their journey of growing their own plants and things like that, I'm still a beginner myself. Well, I wouldn't say a beginner, but, I'm still, like you said, making mistakes. I still will kill a plant and just be like, oh, shit, like, how did I do that? That's part of it. And I think that's the cool thing with gardening. You learn so many different skills. And I was thinking before about the really cool thing about gardening. And at the moment, all these people that are growing their own things, it's sort of teaching them and connecting them with our food growers in New Zealand in the way that that patience and empathy are skills you sort of learn, because you think, oh my gosh, when I just go and grab that cucumber off the shelf, that's blooming hard work to grow that, and I think that's quite exciting. Sort of that empathy for our New Zealand food growers and the hard work that they go through.
I think I might actually see if I can offer double the amount of money for my broccoli at New World, because I've really appreciated how hard it is, or I'm just not on the right track with that at all. But that wasn't it interesting though, Flora? I mean, there was a seed shortage before there was a flower shortage. With the lockdown.
Was that? Do you mean for like
plantings and seedlings sold out dramatically in that Tuesday prior, before flower did? I mean, we obviously as a nation understand where our food comes from.
Yes. There was a wee bit of an issue there, though. A lot of people sort of did the classic panic buy and were buying like watermelon seeds and cucumber seeds and sweet corn. And it's like, hang on a minute. We can't grow them at this time of year, but that's all learning. I mean, I know King seeds and Egmont seeds during about halfway through lockdown actually had to close their business for a few days, or close orders and just catch up. The orders were just through the roof.
A bit of calm the farm. So in terms of the grow kits, can you tell us sort of the interaction that you have at the farmers markets, and you, of course, you're building your online business as well, and how that has really shaped a community around support to people to grow food and understand it?
Yeah, I think that's the coolest thing, is the community that I feel that our wee business is built. It's crazy, you know too, Sarah, the power of social media, and the community that we've built is so cool. And I just love going to those markets and taking that time, and then speaking to people, and then they go, oh, like, and it's just such a great moment when you can teach them about something. So like we've got our wee bee hotels as well, that my boyfriend helps me build. He's a builder, so he does most of the work there. But it's such a cool way to educate people with my products, and I just love those conversations and inspiring people, and I'm very passionate about my wee business, and I think that passion is quite contagious for a lot of people when I meet them at the markets and things, and then they're like, oh, I want to have a crack at that. And that's
Can you tell us about the bee hotels, because I'm really excited about this. The old man has got 3 new hives, and he's just cannot believe the amount of honey that they're getting out of it. But it can actually be in a smaller way, right? That we can all have our own bees and nurture our bee population, which is, of course, our world population.
Yeah. It's a pretty low maintenance way to have your own bees, because it's actually a bee hotel is actually for the solitary bees, which a lot of New Zealand native bees are solitary. So it actually means they don't live in a hive and they don't produce honey. But they are very important pollinators, and I think people sort of underestimate the power of a bee. But, you know, so many of our fruit and vegetables in our country require pollination by bees, mainly honeybees, with, you know, people that have an apiary, is it apiary, I think? And they take them and move them around to different orchards and market gardens and things like that to pollinate those crops. But the solitary bees, they lay their larvae inside the holes of the bee hotel, and that is where they pack it up with mud or whatever they can find, and then their larvae hatch and fly out. So that they don't live together. That's just a process. That's just their life cycle. So it gives them a safe place to live, which is quite cool, because their homes are sort of on the decline.
Wow!
Unfortunately.
Fantastic. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a halfway house, you'd say, for them to stop over.
But that's why we call it the bee hotel. They can just stop over, breed, or shelter there, and you just sit them up in a tree or up on a fence facing north, the best you can, and so they're not getting hit by the southerly winds and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Flora, just before we go, we have Minister Shane Jones on next. In terms of the government in general and what you'd like to see in terms of investment in agricultural education in this country.
Yeah. So I think into the lower decile schools would be really cool, and the education around food growing, budgeting, understanding the jobs in the primary industry. And I think there's so many out there that people don't even know about. And sort of trying to bridge that gap between urban and rural, the urban and rural divide. So educating people in urban schools and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that you've got a long career ahead of you. You're a very passionate young woman. Thank you so much. That's Flora Brons taking the time to join us on Sarah's Country. Go on to Instagram and check out Flora, Flora, and follow her on Instagram, and she's doing some great work. Now, as I was saying, coming up after the break, we are joined by Minister for Regional Development, Mr. Shane Jones. And I would love your questions for him. I certainly have a few across a range of topics, but this show, Sarah's Country, is all about you, our audience. So put them in the comments below. We're going to discuss New Zealand First's push for better rural broadband. We're, of course, going to talk about how to keep our wood on shores to benefit Kiwis. And, of course, when are we going to feel the effects of the PGF, the Primary Growth Fund? Of course, we need to hit our region soon into economic recovery. More on that and we'll after the break. So put your comments and your questions below, and we'll get to Minister Shane Jones.
This is Sarah's Country.
Okay, so there's an article from Richard Rennie on the front page right at the moment, Farmers Weekly, and it reads the headline, Think Local Push, from, of course, Minister Shane Jones. And he's this is in regards, to when it comes to our local foresters driving more wood first into our local wood processing. This is among many initiatives we're going to be talking to Shane Jones about, and joins us now. Kia ora, sir.
Kia ora. Hello, folks. Greetings from the Bay of Islands.
Wonderful spot that you are isolated in there, Shane. A few chunky topics that we're going to get through tonight. First, let's talk about this. How do you believe the government are going to be able to intervene in, of course, what's always been market forces, telling these foresters where to sell their logs?
Well, I would remind the forestry industry that the dairy farmers are already required through Fonterra to make milk available to their competitors. So it's not as if the primary sector don't have working examples already in existence where the owners of primary sector assets contribute to maintaining other New Zealand businesses. The forestry sector has been well served by this government, and this particular minister has stood up against the attacks from a host of other interests in rural New Zealand associated with hill country farming, and it's now time for the forestry sector to show reciprocity and to direct a suitable amount of their raw product to sustain domestic downstream processing and the jobs that will grow in value in these areas in the rural environment that we need to continue to sustain jobs in.
Okay, we understand the unemployment woes that are downstream for our country post-COVID, Shane. But you're saying this isn't a quota-like system yet. How are you going to be able to administrate this?
So I came from the fishing industry, and I was the chairman of the Maori Fisheries Commission and Sea Lords before I became a politician. So I am very aware of how treacherous it is in dealing with quotas. There has been some misinformation, and I've been quite uplifted actually by the attitude shown by a number of the senior identities in the forest ownership community who do accept that they hold a position of extraordinary privilege because they're the only type of primary sector activity that has been given the light touch in our overseas investment criteria. Horticulture, agriculture, floriculture, all have an extraordinary high threshold, a bar to pass in order to attract overseas investment. That is not the case with forestry.
Shane,
So
was a lot of that directed to getting the funds in around your Billion Trees program, though, and how we were going to be able to scale that up?
Yeah, so there's no shortage of opportunity for us to work with farmers, and we've got proposals at the moment to hugely increase the amount of tree planting to get better water outcomes, including fencing. But just on the question of the foreign-owned forestry interests, they know that we are willing to pass legislation to get a better outcome so that the New Zealand businesses have fair access to this raw material, not just international markets in China.
Okay, when you're talking about this farmland, a lot of marginal Maori land is, of course, sitting there ripe, as opposed to your opposition to the fact of right tree, right place leading into this. What sort of work have you got going on into the PGP fund to shift this tree expansion into that marginal Māori land?
Yeah, you ask a very good question. There's swathes of Māori land that unfortunately it's blighted by a very problematic ownership structure. You have a host of absentee owners, and the whole hapu owns the land and no one wants to take responsibility. We've actually put quite a bit of dough into tidying all that up, and we are also now investing more money in water storage. Water storage is absolutely essential for enhancing the productivity of Māori land, I should say all land. However, my mandate is to work in those neglected areas of the north where there's been almost a biblical-like drought in the way in which it's afflicted the north, the businesses and the communities, and more isolated parts of the Bay of Plenty. So I'm very keen for us to proceed with speed and expeditiously so that we can marry our water funding to the aspirations of the landowners, generate jobs, and turn the capacity of that land to a higher value of exports and over time foreign exchange earnings. And to me, it's a win-win situation. Now, where people want to plant trees to get better water outcomes, obviously our party, New Zealand First, doesn't want to see very many onerous regulations placed on the primary sector as they gather momentum to try and trade our way out of our COVID problems. But we think that by planting trees, fencing streams, working sensibly with landowners, and encouraging my senior colleague, Mr. David Parker, to come up with a solution that gets the buy-in from the farmers, irrespective of the whakapapa, whether they're Pākehā farmers, Maori farmers, corporate farmers, whatever they are. I think that's going to be a good outcome prior to the election, and it reflects the new changed circumstances that have been driven by this COVID affliction.
I love how you said that prior to the election. This is what we're trying to work out around what is campaigning at the moment and what is actual economic recovery, Shane. Now, talking about water storage, Bruce said it's good to have water storage on the table, Shane, but initially you were all about small storage dams and not these large storage systems, which, as we've seen in places like the Waimea, that have been about urban as well as rural irrigation, but urban things like salutation from the sea. Our urban water supply can benefit from a lot of these large water storage programs just as much. Have you swung back to the more larger scale regional infrastructure projects?
Well, I must be very truthful here, Sarah. I have had contact with some of the proponents and interests associated with the Waimea scheme. You may recall in 2018, it was one of the schemes that our government enabled to proceed with some Crown pūtea, some funding. They are circling around the Crown as to whether or not we're able to assist them with the shortfall that they have. Now, in the event that that's the direction they want to head in, as Infrastructure and Provincial Growth Minister, I'll work with Damien O'Connor and bring back a proposal to our colleagues. I think it would be rather perverse if the project has to be abandoned 2/3 of the way through. However, I do have to remind everyone that my water storage investments as the steward of the Provincial Growth Fund, they are not on the mega scale of the projects such as Waimea and Central Plains. They are important, however, in the north, and whether or not the Waimea example is a distinctive case where the Crown has to give some additional pūtea, I'll take that proposal forward in the event that I receive it to my colleagues.
Yeah, and we could talk about water storage till the cows come home, Shane, myself and you, and don't even mention tuki. But let's move on in regards to rural broadband connectivity. It's obviously a passion of yours at the moment to make sure that we can reform this economy. How do you believe it's going to happen, and what hasn't happened under a national government's extensive spending in broadband?
Well, ordinarily it's my style to bash the opposition, but Sarah, I would remind us all that digital rollout was a key feature of Stephen Joyce and the national government's response to the economic downturn after 2008 and 2009. And in many respects, New Zealand communities have been handsomely the beneficiary of that rollout. So I don't want to be capricious and not acknowledge that. However, in some areas in the north, unfortunately, I do have lunatics running around here burning down towers. So God knows how I'm going to affect digital connectivity.
You've got Hone, Shane.
Is burning them down. That's ridiculous, and I hope the police catch them.
Sorry, I just said you've got Hone, Shane. You should be right.
Oh, yeah. Well, funnily enough, Hone Harawira and the other iwi leaders have been the ones on my case to actually encourage the other ministers to continue investing in cell towers and get better digital connectivity, especially if we're going to get our young men and women in the more isolated parts of rural New Zealand to go and do work, for example, on kauri dieback and other such schemes, very hard to maintain momentum in those areas if you don't have digital connectivity because of the lifestyles that a lot of our young people have. So look, $15 million has been announced by Chris Whaafoy. It will be rolled out by Crown Infrastructure Partners, chaired by Mark Binns, who more recently has achieved some repute as the person putting together the $125 billion list of shovel-ready projects. So I'm going to back digital connectivity, but I'm very much a pillion passenger. Chris Whaafoy, who's our communications minister, he's making most of the big calls, and I'm really just happy to support him.
Shane, just before we part, I just want to ensure, I mean, you obviously in the title of your party is New Zealand First and has always been that. There's a lot coming out swinging at your leaders' comments that we need to steer away from globalisation. You do realise that we're a large trading nation at the bottom of the world.
I think what my leader is pointing out is that the COVID affliction has proved to us that we must not denude ourselves of key essential industries in New Zealand. If you are totally reliant on global supply chains that have either clogged up or completely collapsed, it's important we get a better balance between sustaining key institutions in our own sovereign nation and not outsourcing everything. That is a very credible political perspective to reflect. It's one that we will campaign on. However, to suggest that we're turning our back like Luddites on international trade is not only factually wrong, it reflects desperation from our political opponents.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us out of the beautiful Bay of Islands, Minister for Regional Development, Shane Jones. Good to carry on across quite a few topics there, forestry, rural broadband, PGP funding. We went everywhere. So, of course, I'm loving your vegetable gardening tips as we're talking about on this show. Starting to sound like Home and Garden that used to follow Rural Exchange. I miss Tony, actually. But no, of course, it's all to do with what Flora was saying and us getting more connected to our food systems. Now, after the break, we're joined by a good old mate of mine, Cam Higgy, and we're talking about the bull selling season. So stay around for that.
This is Sarah's Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce higher quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Even when everything changes, some things will always stay the same. The cows still need milking, the economy still needs dairy, and dairy farmers will always have what it takes. Whatever you need to keep milking, our job during the lockdown is to get it to you, because we know what it takes.
Aotearoa New Zealand has always been a land that has provided for its people, a land of abundance and opportunity. Our dedicated team at Ag Research know that embracing kaitiakitanga will see this continue for future generations. The work we do is transforming the way we farm and revolutionising the way New Zealanders care for our animals and for our land. We work hard to create the world's most desirable food and bio-based products through smart, sustainable farming, led by some of the world's most phenomenal research and informed by the consumers who benefit from this passion. Through a focus on environmental sustainability and climate change initiatives, this passion will allow our work to continue for generations to come. Our proficiencies in research run wide, from seeds to pest control, high-value food production to practical farming systems and quality assurance. From the smallest rural land use project to international research programs, our science and technology innovations drive the prosperity of our precious agricultural sector. It's through this research that New Zealand retains its position as a scientifically advanced global agricultural leader. Our commitment to the growth of our wider New Zealand economy, its people, and the kaitiakitanga of Aotearoa is at the very heart of every scientific innovation and creation we deliver. Ag Research, firmly grounded in this land, these waters, looking to what's in the stars and the future. Ata Matai, Matai Whetu.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Well, from the end of May through to, of course, early June is a very special time across the rural calendar in New Zealand with bull sale season, of course. But, of course, it's a new way of operating under COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. And there's a lot of uncertainty that's around at the moment about how people are going to be able to purchase bulls, mixed signals coming from the stud breeders. So I thought, why not just give a good man that will know what's going on a call. Cam Haggie, he joins us now, National Auctioneer and Livestock Genetics Rep for PGG Wrightson. Now, Cam, firstly, please tell me you haven't grown a beard.
No, I haven't grown a beard, but I do have a moustache, Sarah.
I know.
I'm only halfway there.
That's good. The sights of these men in lockdown of cavemen days, but you know, that's all, each to their own. That's all good. Hey, now, which part of the country are you in tonight?
I'm just about home. I'm about 40 minutes away from home. I'm sitting on the side of the Auckland motorway, just pulled over to talk to you and your listeners. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll get there eventually.
Cam Haggie does more Ks than a national stock truck firm. So it's always interesting to find out where you are around the country. Cam, of course, you have to sort of, ease into the pedal because it gets a hammering, of course, from May through July. What is your season looking like for you as an agent, but also what is happening out there? How are people going to be able to purchase their bulls?
Well, I think for me as an agent and the rest of our team and anyone involved in the bull selling and purchasing process, it's going to be an interesting season. It's going to be a different one. Obviously, with COVID-19, as you mentioned, things are changing. We've got our online platform, which we've had a good uptake on that, and a lot of people are so nervous about it. But just it may be the only option at the end of the day. Ultimately, they'd like to have their on-farm sales. So we've come up with a hybrid option where we may be able to run an on-farm sale, a normal outcry option with a limited amount of purchases there, and then people have got the ability to also partake in that auction and bid online. So, it's going to be an interesting season. And New Zealand farmers are not big on this type of technology. They don't like to buy without seeing. So, they're going to struggle with it a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Do I dare say, is this a new normal?
I think part of it will be. I know Bidder, their big goal for next year's season was to have live streaming auction, so run it in conjunction with the auction, have a live stream and do that. A few of my clients have said that if this works well, yes, it will be. And I think it will be. I don't think you'll ever get rid of the auction system, but there'll be different versions of it to come in the next few years. Yep.
Also hearing...
Well, one of the few countries that don't do it, Sarah.
Yeah, well, this is right, and I know this intimately well. We both know that. So I won't make sure my questions are leading. But Cam, one thing I am hearing too is, the East Coast has been extremely hit with drought. And how is the bulls finishing, to be fair, going into this time? Has that kind of got a lot to do with it?
To be fair, the bulls on the East Coast are surprisingly good for the season they've had. I was over there early last week, went round about 4 or 5 studs, and one in particular that has been really hit by drought. They've got nothing there. They've bought in a lot of feed. Their bulls are looking as good as they've ever looked, possibly a little bit better. And I think the reason for that is a lot of guys, the drought sort of came a little bit later. And a lot of guys had their bulls up and very forward prior to Christmas, so they'd already grown them. So, the bulls are looking really well this year. All the ones I've seen, haven't seen any bad ones yet.
Speaking like a true agent. No, that's fantastic to hear, because they have certainly had a terrible season, and it's good to check in and make sure that they are performing. And if they can obviously show that they're looking good in that, then they can shift and do for you, Cam.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, they have had a tough year. It's been really tough. Yeah.
Bruce is concerned that there's going to be no pies and sandwiches and beers for you this year. It's just come in here live on. It's a big part of New Zealand rural tradition, of course. Cam?
It is. It's a huge part, and I mean a number of the bull sales, Sarah, as you're well aware. There's a lot of competition around the best bulls, the price of the bulls, but there's a lot of competition around the spread and the aftermatch and so on and so forth. I think this year, I think that'll be very limited. And I think purchasers and what have you are going to be accepting of that. They know it's a different year. They're not going to go and have big meals afterwards. They're not going to have a party and a few beers. They're going to go and they're going to do their business. They're going to go home. And that's what it'll be this year, and then next year I'm sure we'll be back to normal.
It will certainly be an interesting year next year, for sure, Cam, and what's happened from this. But just in parting, where is just generally buyer interest changing and shifting in terms of traits and breeds and things moving? I mean, obviously you can't speak about breeds specifically, but are you seeing our buyers changing at all in the last couple of years from what they're after, especially with the way meat market is?
Not really making huge changes. I mean, we've got, there's definitely sort of two trains of thought around that, and both those camps are getting the results they want. They're managing to find the bulls that perform under the environment that they're taking them to commercially. It's not really changing a whole lot. We get the odd buyer every year that changes breeders and so on and so forth. But a lot of them are sticking to where they've been. They're doing what they've done, and they're getting good results out of it. So, yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a real impact on price with a lot of farmers not being able to get weaners away and the flow-on effect of COVID?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the whole cattle job's been has been sort of gridlocked right through from calf sales through to killing cattle, store market, Yeah, I think it may have somewhat of an impact on there. To what extent, I don't know. I think this year's going to be a year about clearances rather than averages.
Sure.
People are going to be looking to clear bulls rather than get that high average that they've had in the past. Yeah.
But as with everything in farming, Cam, it's about averaging out the years, and hopefully this is just one that becomes part of an average and one that becomes part of our history books. But well done to all that you do and your team at PGG Wright's and Livestock Genetics in navigating a very weird world that's ahead of us. Thank you so much, Cam Higgy, for joining us. Now that's all we've actually got time for tonight. We've just run a little bit over, but that's okay. I mean, that's why we run Sarah's Country Online Live, because we are not bound by, of course, time frame. Sarah's Country podcasts on demand from first thing in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. You can roll over and chuck us on and give us a subscribe, of course, as well. Farmers Weekly YouTube channel you can head to catch up on any of the videos on demand. Love having your suggestions. I actually daily am getting email suggestions coming in of people you want to hear from. So send it to sarah@perimedia.com. So I just want to say good night, go well, and in the polished words of John Clark, we don't know how lucky we are.
This is Sarah's Country.